Subscribe to catch the full story. Don't miss the twists ahead. She had always believed she knew him. Every little quirk, every subtle smile, every hidden glance. She thought she had him figured out. But that day, the one that started like any other ordinary morning in the bustling heart of New York City, would prove just how wrong assumptions could be. Emily had been friends with Jason for years. They had met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams that seemed destined to stretch into the future. He was charming, witty, and entirely devoted to the image of the straight, all-American guy he presented to the world. Or at least, that was what Emily had always believed. She never imagined that a single, spontaneous moment could unravel everything she thought she knew. The morning had begun like any other, with Emily rushing through her tiny apartment, trying to finish her coffee before her next meeting. Her job at the marketing firm kept her on her toes, but the chaos somehow suited her. She thrived in it. Jason had invited her to meet for brunch, something they had done a few times over the past month, but today felt different. There was a flicker of tension in his texts, a hesitation she couldn't quite place. "See you at 11, he had written, followed by an emoji that seemed out of character, a winking smile. She brushed it off, assuming he was just being playful. When she arrived at the small cafe tucked in a quiet corner of Soho, Jason was already there, seated in their usual booth, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them. His eyes, always so expressive, seemed to hold a question she couldn't answer. "Hey, Emily," he said, standing to greet her. His smile was warm, familiar, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart skipped a beat. They talked about work, mutual friends, and the latest city gossip, but Emily noticed an unusual intensity in Jason's gaze. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it lingered in the corners of her mind. There was a curiosity in his eyes that seemed directed entirely at her. She laughed at something he said, and he leaned slightly closer, closer than they had ever been before, and that's when it happened. Without warning, Jason's hand brushed against hers. It was accidental, he said, but the warmth of his touch lingered longer than it should have. Emily's heart began to race, though she tried to ignore it, attributing it to the strong coffee and the excitement of the morning. Then, in a move that shocked her entirely, he leaned in and kissed her. Just one kiss. Soft, electric, and completely unexpected. Emily pulled back instantly, her mind spinning. "Jason, what?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her with a mixture of apology and something else, something raw and unguarded that she had never seen before. "Emily," he said carefully, "I don't know why I did that, but I can't stop thinking about it." Her world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything she had assumed about Jason, the way he dated, the way he smiled at other girls, his casual conversations about crushes and relationships, suddenly seemed like a facade. Could it be possible that everything she believed about him was wrong? That all these years, the image of the straight, unattainable Jason was just that, an image? She wanted to step back, to rationalize the moment, but her body refused to cooperate. The flutter in her stomach, the rapid heartbeat, the undeniable pull toward him, it all screamed one thing. This kiss was real, and it had changed everything. Jason's hand found hers again, tentatively, like he was seeking permission. "I've tried to ignore it," he admitted, "but I can't. I've never felt this way before, not like this." Emily's mind raced. She thought she knew boundaries, thought she knew who he was, thought she could predict the future of their friendship. But the kiss shattered every assumption. Suddenly, the world felt unfamiliar, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. They left the cafe together, walking down the sunlit streets, neither of them speaking much, each lost in thoughts they hadn't dared share before. Emily's mind kept replaying the kiss in vivid detail, the warmth, the softness, the subtle fire that sparked between them. Jason's presence beside her was different now, intimate and electric, yet he carried himself with a cautious restraint that suggested he was as unprepared as she was. By the time they reached the park, the city seemed to fade around them, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of tension and unspoken desire. Jason stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His eyes searched hers for an answer, a signal, anything that would give him permission to continue or a warning to step back. Emily's lips parted, ready to speak, but no words came. Instead, she felt herself leaning just slightly toward him, curiosity mingling with fear and excitement. It was then that Emily realized the truth. Nothing about Jason was what she had assumed. And yet, nothing about the way she felt was accidental either. That single kiss had broken down walls she hadn't even realized existed, exposing feelings that had been lying dormant for years. Questions tumbled through her mind. Who was Jason, really? What did this mean for their friendship? Could a single moment redefine everything they had known? She didn't have the answers, but for the first time, she wanted to find out. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting golden light across the park, Emily and Jason stood in silence, suspended in a moment that neither of them could forget. The world outside moved on, unaware of the revolution that had begun between them, a shift that would challenge every assumption and expectation. Emily's heart pounded with anticipation and fear, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the kiss. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the soft press of Jason's lips against hers, the warmth that lingered far longer than it should have. But as thrilling as it was, it also terrified her. Their friendship had always been solid, predictable in the comforting way of long-term familiarity. And now, everything was different. The very thought of crossing a line, of acknowledging feelings that had never existed before, sent shivers down her spine. But the more she tried to ignore it, the more persistent the memory became, as if the universe itself had decided that nothing could go back to the way it had been. Jason, too, was grappling with his emotions. After their meeting at the park, he had gone back to his apartment, replaying every detail of that impulsive kiss. He couldn't deny the spark, the unexpected intensity of what had happened. He had spent years telling himself that he was just like everyone else, fitting neatly into a box he thought he had to occupy. Straight, predictable, safe. But Emily had undone all of that in one heartbeat. And now he faced a terrifying truth. He wanted more, even though he wasn't entirely sure what more would mean. The next few days were awkward, charged with tension neither of them knew how to address. At work, friends, casual questions about brunch or weekend plans felt like probing interrogations. Every glance, every lingering touch became loaded with unspoken meaning. Emily caught herself staring at Jason when she thought he wasn't looking, and Jason found excuses to brush against her hand when no one else was around. It was exhilarating and frightening all at once, a roller coaster of emotions neither of them had signed up for but couldn't resist. One evening, Emily received a text from Jason. "Can we talk? Not about anything else, just us." Her heart skipped. The ambiguity of it both thrilled and terrified her. They met at a small rooftop bar, the city lights stretching out like a glittering sea beneath them. The atmosphere was intimate, the kind of place where confessions seemed to come more easily. They ordered drinks, sat across from each other, and neither spoke for a long moment, both aware of the tension, both uncertain where to begin. Jason was the first to break the silence. "Emily, I've been avoiding this, avoiding what I feel, but I can't anymore," he said, his voice low, almost trembling. "That kiss, we can't pretend it didn't happen, and I can't pretend I don't feel something for you." Emily's breath caught. She wanted to argue, to deny it, to retreat to the safety of their friendship, but her heart betrayed her. It had been whispering the same truth for days, quietly, insistently. "Jason," she began, her voice barely audible. I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. I thought I understood you, but now I don't even understand myself." They talked for hours, slowly peeling back layers of fear, misunderstanding, and long-hidden emotions. Jason admitted that he had always felt something different about Emily, a magnetic pull he had ignored or rationalized away for the sake of friendship. Emily confessed that she had always admired him, maybe even loved him in a quiet, unspoken way, but had pushed it aside to preserve the bond they had built over years. It was a revelation neither of them had anticipated, and yet it was also comforting. Finally, someone else knew the truth of their feelings. Someone else shared the chaos of longing that had consumed them in secret. The more they talked, the more inevitable it became that their relationship would change. Small gestures became loaded with meaning. A touch on the arm, a lingering glance, the brush of fingers when passing by. It was exhilarating, intoxicating, but also fraught with uncertainty. Both of them knew that crossing this line could have consequences. What would friends think? How would their social circles react? What if they tried this and failed, losing the foundation of their friendship forever? The risk was high. but the pull between them was impossible to ignore. Over the following week, their dynamic shifted subtly but undeniably. At work, they were careful, maintaining a veneer of casual professionalism. But every coffee break, every chance encounter, carried a tension that crackled like electricity. Outside of work, they began spending more time together, exploring the city in ways they had never dared before. Walks in the park, late-night diners, impromptu trips to art galleries. Each moment was infused with a new energy, a sense of discovery. Emily found herself laughing more freely, feeling alive in ways she hadn't realized she'd missed. Jason, too, was learning to embrace emotions he had long suppressed, discovering that vulnerability could be exhilarating rather than terrifying. Yet, despite the excitement, fear lingered at the edges of their newfound intimacy. Emily found herself overthinking every interaction, questioning whether Jason's feelings were genuine or just a fleeting impulse. Jason wrestled with his own insecurities, wondering if he was ready to let go of the carefully constructed persona he had maintained for so long. Their attraction was undeniable, but the path forward was uncharted territory, full of potential pitfalls and heartbreaks. It was during one late-night walk through the city that the tension finally snapped, not in an argument, but in a quiet, unspoken moment of understanding. They stopped at a small bridge overlooking the river, the city lights reflecting in the water below. Emily shivered, and Jason instinctively draped his jacket over her shoulders. Their eyes met, and for the first time they didn't speak. The kiss came naturally, softly, tentatively, but with a certainty that left no room for doubt. It wasn't a kiss born of impulse this time. It was deliberate, a silent promise that whatever uncertainty lay ahead, they would face it together. As they pulled back, both breathless, Jason whispered, I think this changes everything." Emily nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "It does," she admitted, "and I think I'm ready to see where it goes." That night marked a turning point. The fear remained, of course, it was impossible to erase completely, but it was tempered by something far stronger, a shared understanding, a connection that had been waiting years to surface. They walked back through the quiet streets, hands brushing, hearts racing, each step a tentative dance toward a future neither could predict, but both were eager to explore. Even as the city slept around them, Emily realized something profound. Assumptions could be shattered, boundaries could be crossed, and yet in the chaos of uncertainty there was magic to be found. She and Jason were stepping into unknown territory, but for the first time she wasn't afraid to let herself feel everything. The kiss had been the spark, but what followed? The conversations, the confessions, the quiet understanding, was the fire that could either consume them or illuminate a path forward. And for now, that was enough. The following week felt like walking on a tightrope. Emily and Jason were no longer just friends, but they weren't entirely a couple either. The transition between the two states was thrilling, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. Every interaction carried an undertone that neither could ignore. In the office, they remained careful, playing the part of casual colleagues, but the stolen glances, the almost touching hands, and the subtle brush of shoulders hinted at a connection far deeper than anyone else could see. Emily found herself counting the hours until they could be alone, away from the scrutinizing eyes of friends and coworkers, where the rules no longer applied and the spark between them could fully ignite. Yet, as much as Emily wanted to surrender to the thrill, doubts gnawed at her constantly. She tried to rationalize the kiss, to frame it as a fleeting moment of curiosity, but her heart refused to comply. Every memory of Jason's smile, the warmth in his eyes, the unmistakable pull she felt toward him, reminded her that this was something far from fleeting. She began to notice his small gestures in a new light, the way he checked if she was okay after a long day, the way he remembered the smallest details about her life, the way he laughed at things that no one else seemed to understand. It was intimacy, quiet and unspoken, yet profound. Jason, on the other hand, wrestled with his own fears. He had never imagined himself in this situation, never thought he would cross the line from friendship to something romantic, especially with Emily. But now that the line was crossed, he couldn't ignore the desire and connection that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. He wanted her, more than he had ever wanted anything before, but he also feared losing the friendship that had meant so much. Every kiss, every lingering touch, was a reminder that their relationship was precarious, balanced on the knife's edge between passion and disaster. One evening, Emily received a call from Jason, asking if she could meet him at a nearby coffee shop after work. Her heart leapt as she hurried through the streets of Manhattan, anticipation and nervousness coiling inside her. When she arrived, Jason was already there, sitting in a corner booth, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, his expression unreadable. The familiar warmth that usually accompanied his smile was replaced by something heavier: concern, hesitation, a question he wasn't yet voicing. "Hey," Emily said softly, sliding into the seat across from him. Jason looked up, and for a brief moment she saw the vulnerability that he rarely allowed anyone to witness. "Hey," he replied, his voice low. There was a pause, thick with unspoken words. Finally, he leaned forward slightly. "Emily, we need to talk about what's happening between us," he began carefully. "I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to make a mistake, but I also can't ignore how I feel. It's complicated." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. "I know," she admitted. "I feel it too, but what does it mean? Are we dating, or is this just something temporary?" Jason shook his head, frustration flickering across his features. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I want it to be real, Emily. I want it to mean something. But I also don't want to rush things or scare you away. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this, and I hope we can do it together." Their conversation stretched for hours, the cafe around them fading into the background as they explored the delicate terrain of their emotions. Emily admitted her fears, her hesitation, and the insecurities that had built up over years of unacknowledged feelings. Jason shared his own doubts, the struggle to reconcile the man he had always portrayed with the man he truly wanted to be. And slowly, painstakingly, they began to carve a path forward, a tentative understanding that allowed them to explore their feelings while respecting the boundaries they still needed. As the weeks passed, their connection deepened. They started spending weekends together, exploring the city in ways that felt intimate and special. Museums, late-night strolls through lit-up streets, quiet dinners at hidden cafes. Each experience was infused with a sense of discovery, a thrill that came from knowing they were exploring uncharted territory together. Emily found herself falling deeper, not just for the excitement of the romance, but for the man Jason truly was, stripped of pretenses and masks. And Jason, in turn, discovered a vulnerability and honesty in Emily that drew him closer, making him realize that love was more complex and beautiful than he had ever imagined. But life, as it always does, refused to let them have their newfound happiness without challenge. Rumors began to surface at work, whispers about the closeness between Emily and Jason that had not gone unnoticed. Some colleagues noticed their lingering glances, the way they seemed to exist in a bubble around each other. Emily felt the pressure mounting, the fear that their private world could be exposed, turning excitement into stress. She worried about how others would react, whether assumptions would be made, and whether the delicate balance they had achieved could withstand scrutiny. Jason sensed her growing anxiety and did everything he could to reassure her. He made small gestures that spoke volumes, holding her hand discreetly when they walked to meetings, sending her thoughtful texts, and creating moments of intimacy that were theirs alone. He wanted her to know that no matter what others thought, he was committed to navigating this path with her. And in those moments, Emily felt a sense of safety, a certainty that even amid external pressures, their connection was genuine and resilient. One night, after a particularly long week, Jason invited Emily to his apartment. It was a cozy space, filled with personal touches that spoke of his hidden depth. Books stacked neatly on shelves, photographs capturing moments from his travels, and a record player softly filling the room with music. They sat on the couch together, drinking wine and talking quietly, the world outside forgotten. Jason reached for Emily's hand, holding it with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I also can't imagine not having you in my life like this. I want us to explore this together at our own pace." Emily smiled, leaning against him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I want that too," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I've never felt this way before. It's scary, but it also feels right." They sat in silence for a while, letting the comfort of each other's presence speak louder than words ever could. In that moment, Emily realized that the kiss that had started it all was no longer just a spark. It had ignited a fire that neither of them wanted to extinguish. Yet, despite the intimacy and connection, questions remained. Could they maintain this fragile balance? Could their relationship survive the scrutiny of friends, colleagues, and the world at large? And most importantly, were they ready to confront the truths about themselves and each other that had been buried for so long? The journey was just beginning, and while the path ahead was uncertain, Emily felt a thrill at the possibilities that lay in store. The kiss had been the catalyst, but the real story, the story of love, trust, and discovery, was only beginning to unfold. The city had grown colder, the nights stretching longer, and yet the tension between Emily and Jason burned hotter than ever. What had started as a hesitant exploration of feelings was now becoming something undeniably intense, yet fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. Emily had never imagined that love could be so thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Every moment with Jason brought a rush of exhilaration, but also an undercurrent of fear. Fear that the fragile world they were building could shatter at any moment. And that fear was about to face its first real test. It began subtly, with whispers and glances at work that Emily had tried to ignore. At first, she thought she was imagining it, that her heightened awareness of Jason made her overly sensitive to the mundane actions of coworkers. But soon, the evidence became undeniable. A snide remark here, a knowing glance there, the subtle way people stepped back when she and Jason passed. It was clear that their closeness had not gone unnoticed. Emily's stomach churned with anxiety. She had known there would be risks, but seeing them manifest in such a personal and invasive way unsettled her more than she expected. Jason, ever perceptive, noticed the change immediately. He approached her one evening after work, his hand brushing against hers, a quiet gesture of reassurance. "Hey," he said softly, his eyes scanning her face for the worry he knew was there. "I can tell something's bothering you. Talk to me." Emily hesitated, unsure if she wanted to confront the reality she had been avoiding. But the trust they had been carefully cultivating allowed her to take a deep breath and speak. "It's them," she admitted, nodding toward the other end of the office where a group of coworkers lingered, their murmured conversations clearly about her and Jason. "People are noticing us, and it's uncomfortable. I feel like every move we make is under a microscope." Jason's expression darkened slightly, a mix of frustration and protectiveness crossing his features. "Emily, let them watch all they want. None of it changes what we have. None of it changes how I feel." His words were meant to reassure, but Emily knew the challenges they faced weren't just about casual gossip. They were about navigating a world that refused to let them have happiness without questioning it. The kiss, the late-night conversations, the laughter and intimacy they shared. Everything was now under the scrutiny of judgmental eyes, and that weight threatened to smother the fragile flame they had kindled. That weekend, they decided to escape the city for a brief retreat, a way to recharge and reclaim the private moments they had been losing. They drove out to the outskirts, a small cabin by the lake, far from the prying eyes of friends, colleagues, and strangers. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of a temporary reprieve from reality. For a moment, everything else ceased to exist. Emily felt herself exhale fully for the first time in days, the tension easing from her shoulders as Jason reached for her hand and led her toward the water's edge. They spent the afternoon walking along the lake, the golden light of late afternoon casting a soft glow over the trees. The silence between them was comfortable, punctuated only by occasional laughter or the sound of footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. It was in this quiet space that Emily realized just how deeply she had fallen for Jason. His presence was magnetic, grounding, and terrifying all at once. Every look, every gentle touch, every laugh shared in that secluded paradise reminded her of the intensity of her feelings and the undeniable connection that had grown between them. But even in this sanctuary, uncertainty crept in. Emily noticed moments when Jason would hesitate, his brow furrowing as if wrestling with a thought he couldn't voice. When she asked him about it, he admitted that part of him was still afraid of losing her, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of the judgment that awaited them back in the city. "I know it sounds crazy," he said quietly, "but sometimes I wonder if we're moving too fast or if all of this is just fleeting." Emily shook her head, her own fears mirrored in his vulnerability. It's not fleeting, Jason, it's real, and I don't want to lose us. We'll figure it out together. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, they sat by the fire inside the cabin, wrapped in blankets and the comfort of each other's presence. The world outside seemed distant and irrelevant. Jason took Emily's hand in both of his, holding it gently, his eyes searching hers for affirmation. I've never felt anything like this, he confessed, his voice raw and sincere. It's scary, but it's also the most real thing I've ever experienced. And I don't want to let it go. Emily's heart ached with a mixture of love and relief. I feel the same, she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. We're in this together, no matter what comes next. The reprieve was brief, however. Upon returning to the city, they found that whispers and judgment had only intensified. Gossip had evolved into speculation, and speculation into confrontation. Colleagues began asking pointed questions, subtle digs were made during meetings, and Emily could sense the judgment in every glance. The pressure threatened to break the fragile cocoon they had built during their escape. Yet Jason remained steadfast, protective, and unwavering, constantly reminding her that their connection was worth fighting for, worth protecting against the forces that sought to undermine it. It was during a particularly tense day at the office that the first real challenge arose. A coworker, emboldened by the rumors, confronted Emily directly in the break room. So, are you two actually? She began, her voice laced with judgment. Emily felt her stomach drop, but before she could respond, Jason appeared at her side, calm yet authoritative. Yes, we are, he said simply, his presence commanding respect. And it's none of your concern how we feel or what we choose to do. His protective stance, paired with Emily's quiet acknowledgement of the truth, stunned the coworker into silence. The moment was small, yet significant, a declaration that they would no longer allow the world to dictate the terms of their relationship. That night, Emily and Jason met at their favorite rooftop spot, the city lights twinkling beneath them like a sea of possibilities. We survived today, Emily said, a small laugh escaping her lips despite the tension. Jason smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And we'll survive tomorrow, too. Whatever comes at us, we face it together. In that moment, Emily realized that love was not just about passion or desire. It was about trust, resilience, and the courage to face challenges as a united front. The kiss that had started it all had ignited something far more powerful, a bond capable of withstanding the judgment, fear, and uncertainty that life inevitably threw their way. As they leaned against each other, watching the city below, Emily understood that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be obstacles, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that with Jason by her side, they could navigate the storm. The fire that had begun with a single, unexpected kiss was now a steady flame, illuminating a path forward, a path that neither of them could have predicted, but both were eager to explore. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Emily and Jason had grown closer, their bond deepening with every shared secret, every lingering glance, and every quiet moment of understanding. Yet, life had a way of testing even the strongest connections, and for them, that test arrived in the form of unexpected complications. It started with a new coworker, Chloe, whose presence at the office immediately unsettled Emily. Chloe was smart, charming, and outgoing, and she seemed to take a particular interest in Jason. At first, Emily tried to dismiss it as harmless politeness, but there was something in Chloe's eyes, the subtle way she laughed at Jason's jokes, the way she lingered near his desk, that triggered an unshakable sense of unease. Jason noticed Emily's discomfort, though he tried not to show it. He was careful with his interactions, ensuring nothing crossed the line, but Emily's anxiety grew regardless. She began overanalyzing every conversation, every meeting, every casual interaction Jason had with Chloe. It was exhausting, and Emily hated herself for feeling jealous, knowing rationally that Jason had never given her a reason to doubt him. Yet, emotions rarely followed logic. The fear of losing him, of seeing their fragile happiness threatened, gnawed at her relentlessly. The tension reached its peak during a team project that required close collaboration between Jason and Chloe. Emily watched from her desk as they brainstormed ideas, their hands occasionally brushing over papers, their laughter filling the air. She felt a tight knot form in her chest, her heartbeat accelerating as insecurities she thought she had buried resurfaced with force. Unable to remain passive any longer, she excused herself and took a walk outside, needing air, space, and a moment to reclaim her composure. The city streets offered no comfort. The throngs of people seemed to mirror the turmoil inside her. Jason noticed her absence quickly and followed her to the rooftop terrace where she often went to think. He found her leaning against the railing, staring out at the skyline, her hands gripping the edge as if it could anchor her racing thoughts. "Emily," he said gently, approaching her cautiously. "Hey, what's wrong?" She turned to face him, her eyes shimmering with frustration and hurt. "It's Chloe," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't help feeling like she's, I don't know, intruding. I know you would never intentionally hurt me, but I can't stop feeling this way." Jason sighed, his expression softening with understanding. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Emily, listen to me. I care about you, only you. Chloe is just a coworker. She doesn't matter. What we have matters. And I promise nothing she does will ever change that." His words, spoken with sincerity and conviction, brought a wave of relief over her, yet the fear lingered. It wasn't just about Chloe. It was about the fragility of trust, the vulnerability of exposing one's heart, and the fear of being hurt when feelings were strongest. They spent the evening walking through the quiet streets, hand in hand, talking about their emotions, their fears, and the importance of honesty in their relationship. Emily realized that part of what had fueled her anxiety was not Jason himself, but the way her own insecurities had been left unchecked. Jason, in turn, promised to remain open and patient, understanding that love was not just about passion, but about reassurance and care. That night, they shared a long, lingering kiss beneath the streetlights, reaffirming the connection that had started with one impulsive, unforgettable moment. But just as they began to regain equilibrium, life threw another curveball. Jason received a promotion at work, one that required him to travel frequently and work long hours. While it was an incredible opportunity, it also meant less time with Emily, and the physical distance threatened to strain their relationship. Emily felt a pang of worry. How could they maintain the intimacy and trust they had built if they were constantly apart? The thought of Jason in another city, surrounded by new people, new experiences, ignited a fresh wave of anxiety she struggled to suppress. Jason noticed her unease and tried to ease it with constant communication, late-night video calls, long texts, and weekend visits whenever possible. Yet, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She began overthinking, interpreting minor delays in messages or slight changes in tone as signs of disinterest. Each miscommunication, however small, felt monumental, creating a tension that neither of them wanted but both had to navigate. The challenges of distance, coupled with external pressures, tested their patience and commitment in ways they had never anticipated. One particularly difficult evening, Emily found herself alone in her apartment, staring at her phone as Jason's delayed text finally arrived. She read his words carefully, interpreting tone, meaning, and intention, and yet instead of reassurance, she felt a prickling sense of doubt. Unable to contain her frustration, she called him, her voice trembling as emotions spilled over. "Jason, I just don't know if I can handle this," she admitted, tears brimming. "I want to trust you, I really do, but it feels like we're drifting, and I can't stand it." Jason, hearing the vulnerability in her voice, felt a surge of protectiveness. "Emily, look at me," he said gently through the video call, locking eyes with her on the small screen. "I know it's hard. I know it feels like distance is pulling us apart, but we can get through this. We've already faced so much together, rumors, insecurities, challenges, and we survived. This is just another test, and I promise you we'll come out stronger on the other side." His words, filled with sincerity and love, finally broke through her walls, reminding her that their bond was resilient, built on trust, honesty, and shared vulnerability. In the days that followed, they made a conscious effort to reinforce their connection. They planned trips, set aside time for long conversations, and found small ways to remind each other of their love. Every message, every call, every shared moment became a lifeline, a reminder that despite external pressures and challenges, what they had was real and worth protecting. Emily realized that love was not just about excitement or chemistry. It was about perseverance, patience, and the willingness to confront fears together. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and Jason's relationship grew stronger, tempered by the challenges they had faced. Chloe eventually became a minor distraction, her flirtations and presence fading into the background as Emily's confidence in Jason solidified. The promotion and resulting travel tested them, but also reinforced their commitment, proving that distance could never weaken the bond they had nurtured. And through it all, the memory of their first kiss remained the anchor, the spark that had ignited a journey neither of them could have anticipated, but both were determined to see through. By the time they celebrated 6 months since that fateful kiss, Emily understood something profound. Love was not easy. It was messy, complicated, and sometimes terrifying. But it was also exhilarating, transformative, and worth every challenge. And as she looked at Jason, his eyes warm and steady, she realized that every struggle, every moment of doubt had only made their connection stronger. The kiss had shattered assumptions, but it had also built something far greater: trust, intimacy, and a love capable of withstanding the storms of life. The city was alive with lights, the hum of traffic, and the soft whispers of evening conversations drifting through the streets. But for Emily and Jason, the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. After months of navigating uncertainty, jealousy, distance, and unexpected challenges, they had reached a moment of clarity, a moment where all the doubts and fears that had plagued them seemed to dissolve, leaving only the raw truth of their feelings. The kiss that had started everything now felt like a distant spark, replaced by a steady, unwavering flame that neither of them could deny. It began with a quiet evening at Jason's apartment, the space bathed in the golden glow of a late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. Emily had spent the day organizing her thoughts, ready to confront her lingering insecurities once and for all. Jason, sensing her quiet determination, sat across from her on the couch, hands clasped loosely in his lap, his gaze calm yet intense. "Emily," he began softly, "we've been through so much these past months. I know it hasn't been easy, and I know there are moments when fear or doubt creeps in. But I want you to know something I've felt since the very first moment we kissed." Emily's heart beat faster, anticipation coiling in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason reached for her hand, his touch grounding, warm, and familiar. "I love you, Emily," he said, his eyes holding hers with a sincerity that left no room for doubt. "I have for months, and I know now that nothing, distance, rumors, challenges, anything can change that. You're the one I want in my life always." Emily's breath caught. She had heard words before, promises whispered in fleeting moments. But this was different. The conviction in his voice, the depth in his eyes, and the unwavering certainty in his expression told her everything she needed to know. Tears sprang unbidden to Emily's eyes, a mixture of relief, love, and joy washing over her in an overwhelming wave. "Jason, I love you too," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I have since that first kiss. I was scared to admit it, scared of what it might mean, but I can't deny it anymore. You've changed everything for me in the best possible way." They leaned toward each other, a slow, deliberate movement, closing the final space between them. The kiss that followed was nothing like the impulsive, hesitant moment months ago. It was deep, steady, and full of promise. A kiss that spoke of resilience, trust, and love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. For the first time since their journey began, they allowed themselves to simply exist in the moment, savoring the closeness that had grown from a single impulsive act. Emily rested her head against Jason's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and for the first time she felt completely safe, completely seen, and completely loved. The months of doubt, distance, and external pressures melted away, leaving only the undeniable truth: they were meant to be together. Their relationship, strengthened by trials and uncertainty, entered a new phase, one of confidence, intimacy, and shared dreams. They began planning for the future, not in a rushed or panicked way, but with the careful consideration that comes from understanding and mutual respect. Weekend getaways, quiet dinners, and shared hobbies became the foundation of a life that felt both exciting and grounded. Emily discovered that love was not just about passion, but about partnership, patience, and the willingness to face life's challenges hand in hand. Jason, in turn, realized that vulnerability was not a weakness, but the strongest bond two people could share. Yet, just as their personal worlds settled into harmony, the universe reminded them that life rarely followed a straight path. Emily received an unexpected job offer in another city, a promotion that would further her career, but also risk the stability they had fought so hard to build. The news hit them both hard, creating a tense, unspoken anxiety between them. They spent long hours discussing the possibilities, weighing the pros and cons, and considering the impact on their relationship. For a brief moment, fear of separation resurfaced, but they quickly reminded themselves of the foundation they had laid: trust, love, and commitment. Ultimately, the decision was made together as a team. Emily would accept the promotion, but they would find a way to navigate the distance, just as they had before. They would schedule visits, maintain communication, and cherish the time they had together, knowing that love, true, resilient love, could withstand any challenge. The choice was not easy, but it reaffirmed their belief in each other and the strength of their bond. As the weeks turned into months, they adapted to the new rhythm of their lives. Technology became a lifeline. Late-night calls, morning messages, and weekend visits became sacred rituals. They celebrated milestones, big and small, with gratitude and joy, each moment reinforcing their commitment. Emily found herself thriving in her new role, bolstered by Jason's unwavering support, while Jason continued to grow in his career, confident in the knowledge that their love was a constant anchor. One evening, during a weekend visit, Jason surprised Emily with a quiet dinner on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline. The lights sparkled below like stars fallen to earth, and the air carried the faint scent of night-blooming flowers. Jason took her hands in his eyes reflecting the depth of his love and certainty. "Emily," he said softly, "we've faced so much together. Every challenge, every fear, every doubt has only made us stronger. And I know there will be more obstacles ahead, but I want you to know something. I want to face them all with you. Will you be with me always?" Emily's heart swelled, tears filling her eyes once more. She nodded, unable to find words that matched the intensity of her feelings. Jason smiled, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple yet elegant, a symbol of the journey they had shared and the future they were choosing together. "Yes," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will." The kiss that followed sealed their promise, a kiss that was no longer tentative or uncertain, but bold, unshakable, and full of love. In that moment, the months of struggle, doubt, and fear were nothing but stepping stones that had led them to this profound certainty. They had survived the gossip, the distance, the jealousy, and the insecurities, emerging stronger and more connected than ever before. As they held each other beneath the starlit sky, Emily realized that love was not about avoiding fear or uncertainty. It was about embracing it together, knowing that every challenge was an opportunity to grow closer, to deepen trust, and to reaffirm the bond that had begun with a single, unexpected kiss. Jason kissed her forehead, whispering, "This is only the beginning." And she knew, with every fiber of her being, that he was right. The kiss had shattered assumptions, but it had also built a love that would endure, a love capable of facing anything life could throw their way. The city stretched out around them, vast and unknowable, yet within the small bubble they had created, Emily and Jason had discovered something timeless, a love that was patient, resilient, and unwavering. And as they watched the lights flicker and the stars shimmer above, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, stronger, braver, and more in love than ever before.